So we're going to begin today's discussion about income security with our panel discussion. And first up, we have Garima Talwar-Kapoor, who's the Director of Policy and Research for the Maitrey Foundation, who's going to be outlining some of how the still pending policy choices are going to impact folks who are receiving social assistance. Garima, go ahead.
Thanks so much for having me today, Ontario for All and United Way Greater Toronto. It's a very important conversation, and really thrilled to see so many people join us for this this session, especially given there's just so much going on in this world, and our ability to think about what's happening globally but still respond locally, I think, is really important. So to kick things off, I'm going to set some of the foundational elements of how we understand social assistance in Ontario, and then I'll pass it over to my colleague, Devora. But as you'll all know, Ontario's system of supports for people with low incomes isn't necessarily reflective of today's economic, labor market realities and social realities. Social assistance in particular is ineffective and is in need of significant support, regardless of where you are on the political spectrum. Everyone can agree that social assistance is broken. Social assistance, the system is made up largely of two programs in Ontario. One is Ontario Works, and the other is the Ontario Disability Support Program, or ODSP. Typically, and this is important to keep in mind in terms of where there's areas for future movement, social assistance is considered to be a program of last resort. And so that means that eligible recipients are required to meet not only stringent criteria to access social assistance support, but they can't actually increase their total incomes and reach a greater level of income adequacy if they are also eligible for other types of income replacement programs like employment insurance, WSIB benefits, or CPPD. This is unlike other income tested tax credits and benefits that are available to families, for example, where a family that receives social assistance can also receive the Canada Child Benefit and the OCB. And so you already start to see that there's a little bit, people who receive social assistance may not be receiving all of the supports that they are actually eligible for. Within the rate structure of social assistance, many of you will know that the rate structure is split into two parts. One is the basic needs component, and the other is the shelter allowance. So for example, a single adult receiving Ontario Works in 2022 would have received a basic needs portion of about $343. And depending on their shelter costs, they could have received a maximum of $390 for a total benefit, maximum total monthly benefit of $733. As we know, people who receive social assistance are also eligible for other types of in-kind benefits like coverage for prescription medications. But unfortunately, who is eligible for these different types of income in-kind supports depends on which program you're in. And while I've glossed over a lot of what the complexity of the rate structure, what I think is important to keep in mind is that at $733 for a single adult receiving Ontario Works, or even at $1,169 for a single ODSP recipient, the rates are extremely, extremely low and inadequate. And, beyond several reasons for keeping the rates low, one of them, and I'd say the most significant, is this really antiquated idea that if you keep rates low, people will be incentivized to join the labor market. And so by design, we have created this program that has created low rates with this idea that people will join the labor market without thinking about the realities of the labor market and whether the labor market is actually creating good jobs and decent work. For a single adult receiving Ontario Works and other income tested benefits, they're at about 40% of the poverty measure. And if you don't tax file, or if you don't receive the full shelter component, your benefit level will be lower. Just at a high level, the number of people receiving Ontario Works in 2019, social assistance in 2019 and 2020 was about 1 million people, or about 6.5% of the Ontario population. Moreover, about 10.9% of people in Ontario, or just over 1.5 million people, lived in poverty in 2019. So that is to say that about 2/3 of people who live in poverty actually receive social assistance. And so not everybody who is in poverty is actually receiving social assistance. I'll now segue to my colleague Devorah, but the two things that I'd like to note around this transformation agenda that the government has is that there's two twin components. One is to offload employment and training services to non-government partners, and one is life stabilization. And we can debate the opportunities and challenges associated with both. One thing that I will keep in mind is that, in our work, focusing on fiscal investment and regulatory change is really going to be important, because otherwise, the work that we're doing on integrated services is more, akin to rearranging deck chairs in a sinking ship. And we want to get away from that.
And I want to turn now to Meghan Nicholls, who is the CEO of the Mississauga Food Bank. We'll look at how these challenges impact communities, and in particular impact the community of Mississauga.
Thanks so much, Sean. It's great to be with you folks today, talking a little bit about income and just bringing a little bit of a perspective from our work in the hunger alleviation space at the Mississauga Food Bank. We can go to the next slide. The Mississauga Food Bank is the central food bank in Mississauga. We have a network of over 50 agencies, including neighborhood food banks, pantries, meal and snack programs, and our team distributes food that's healthy and appropriate for almost 5 million meals each year to vulnerable children, seniors, and families and others just in the city of Mississauga. Next slide. So who is hungry? Who is using the food bank system? In our city, Mississauga's population is about 800,000, and about 100,000 people in the city of Mississauga live below the poverty line. Those using food banks are disproportionately people of color. 80% of our clients are people of color, self-identified, versus 57% of the general population. And almost half of all clients using the food bank in Mississauga report social assistance as the main source of their income. People are using the food bank because they are recipients of these social supports. And as we've talked, and as my colleagues have talked about, these are the rates that force people to live in poverty. The next slide. At the onset of the pandemic, there was a real growth, real spike in demand at the food bank. And despite kind of gradual economic recovery that we're seeing in the community, of course, poverty has persisted, and unless there are changes, will continue to persist. And food bank demand continues to rise. You can see this in our chart here, showing the amount of food that's been distributed and the number of food bank clients. And, even as we've just reached this week, 2 years into the pandemic, remember 2 weeks to flatten the curve? I can almost not think about it, that 2 weeks into 2 years, our region has seen economic recovery, but of course, poverty continues to persist in our community. Next slide. But all those numbers, the most important part is that they're real people. This is Emily, who asked for her face not to be shown in the photo we took of her, who is an ODSP recipient and a food bank client at our neighborhood food bank located in the Malton area of Mississauga, north of the airport. She's always short on money. She told us to buy food after paying rent, utilities, and her other basic monthly expenses. Now, of course, food prices have risen this year and have continued to rise year over year, and we're anticipating increased, more like increases as the year goes on, 5 to 7% perhaps. And, Emily told us that she's had to, go without dinner and go without meals a number of times in order to make sure that her kids had enough to eat. And what strikes me the most about Emily's experience, like so many food bank clients, is that she was directed to go to the food bank through her OW representative. That's the channel. OW says the way you're going to make it is by going to get a food bank. And, you know, even the employees within the social assistance system knows that it falls short of the bare minimum that folks need. Next slide, please. You know, extensive, current, reputable research continues to show that food banks are enough. And we know at the food bank that our charitable food response can never meet the needs of our community. And so in addition to our work distributing food, we invest resources in continuing to advocate and participate in forums like these on behalf of our hungry neighbors to ensure government policies prioritize meeting the needs of those using food banks. So we're currently advocating for an increase to social assistance rates to match inflation at a minimum and subsequently the cost of living, a review of social assistance administration to ensure users have access to appropriate supports, the funding of the expansion of wraparound services for folks receiving OW and ODSP, and the development of pilots to determine the best type of guaranteed basic income that will suit different parts of Canada to see these numbers decrease. You know, for now, it takes all of us to feed our hungry neighbors, but we would like to bring about a day when our services are no longer required because folks can afford food on their own, and see that as a crucial part of our work alongside distributing that food to make sure that we're not needed at some point. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Meghan. That's terrific, and under 5 minutes, impressively. Next up, I want to introduce Trevor Manson. Trevor is the co-chair of the ODSP Action Coalition and an ODSP client, and he'll talk a bit about the impact of policies on people who are recipients of social assistance and how what Trevor calls the numbers game does, or more importantly, doesn't work for the people who are reliant on that system.
Thanks, Sean. Can you hear me?
Yep, you're coming through loud and clear.
Excellent. Thanks for the opportunity to be here today. Just going to talk a bit about income security in the most basic sense is about numbers. It's a numbers game where the rubber hits the road, as Sean had put it earlier. Next slide. And as some of my fellow panelists have already mentioned or alluded to, this here is a basic ODSP check, what somebody gets every month. It's a check stub or a deposit statement. And as you can see, $672 for basic needs and $497 for shelter. It's $1,169, and that's a maximum that a single person would get every month on ODSP. Next slide. So single people on ODSP, again, as others have mentioned, they get a maximum of $1,169 from the program, or just over $14,000 a year. And of course, rents across Ontario hover over $1,000 a month, you know, a lot higher in urban areas like Toronto and so forth. Close to 80% of ODSP clients are single. Roughly 70% of ODSP clients reside in private market rentals and are paying private market prices. And $1,169 in 2018, which is the last time that ODSP was increased, that is now worth only $1,060 today, which is a 9.3% loss since 2018. Next slide. So of course, $14,000 a year is well below the poverty line, regardless of which measure you look at. The province has shown zero intention to increase rates during their mandate, this current government. And of course, cost of living, homelessness, food insecurity, mental health issues, and desperation are all on the rise among ODSP clients in particular. And the clawbacks that the government makes on any other income that people are able to bring in, it goes against its own poverty reduction strategies. And the province's modernization of social assistance does nothing to address the number one issue affecting clients, which is poverty. Next slide. So where's the logic? ODSP will start clawing back monthly earnings from employment after the first $200 that you earned, and then 50% clawback thereafter. So once you hit $1,369, that's when a 50% clawback kicks in on earnings. However, under a particular directive under ODSP, clients are allowed to receive up to a maximum of $10,000 in gifts or voluntary payments in any 12-month period. So therefore, in effect, fortunate or well-connected clients may potentially receive an additional $833 a month in gifts without penalty, which would total over $2,000 a month. And of course, gifts of any amount for specific purposes are totally exempt as income, and that would be things like accessibility devices or perhaps modifications to someone's home. Next slide. So here's the challenges. We have a lot more challenges than opportunities here, it seems. If fortunate ODSP clients are allowed to receive up to $10,000 a year in gifts, should those who are able to work not be allowed to earn up to the same amount without clawbacks? And it's not really that much if you think about it. If somebody was working, somebody that was able to work, say 15 hours a week, and even if they only worked 45 weeks out of the year, that would still be over $10,000 in income. So the government should be looking at ways to let recipients keep more of that money. And similarly for people who receive income replacement programs, particularly from the federal government with CPP disability or EI or other programs along those lines, should they be allowed to stack benefits or at least treat them as earned income if the province is refusing to increase rates flat out? Maybe this would be something that would at least sound more acceptable to them and not sound like they're increasing rates per se. So how do we convince the province to let clients keep more of their money, either through earned income clawbacks, stacked benefits, or so forth, so people can get closer to the poverty line and help the federal and provincial and municipal governments meet their poverty reduction strategy goals. And another aspect is how do we get rid of asset limits for applicants or clients so people don't have to be liquidating RSPs and investments and so forth if they're applying for ODSP for the first time. And that's pretty much it. That's all my slides. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Trevor. And our last speaker is Andrea Hatala, who is the other co-chair of the ODSP Action Coalition and also a client. And she'll talk about some of the systemic barriers in the emerging models and the consequences they have for people receiving social assistance. Andrea, go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me speak on the panel. I really appreciate it. I just want to go over quickly some of the types of advocacy that people can have, because Devora and people have said that people can advocate, but just a quick like talk about how people can advocate, because so the more people that advocate for this and the louder our voice is, the better it will be, because if people know how many people, if the ministry and the politicians know how many people are suffering, then we will have a better chance of getting an increase in rates and stuff. So there's like letters to the ministry and actually trying to open up a conversation with the ministry. That sometimes helps. And there's petitions. The more people that you can get to sign petitions, you know, that helps because it shows numbers of people. There's also Twitter blasts to the minister. If you can take the social media of the minister and some of the other people and keep yourself in there, then like the minister has to pay attention to that. And the last resort is rallies. We are having a rally on April 26th. And the more people that we can get out, the better. So, and I also just have a few points about things that other people will are saying. The life stabilization services are funded municipally, and the problem with that is that there's no consistency. We've had an opportunity, especially before the pandemic, to go around to different municipalities because we wanted to be a provincial-wide organization. And so some of the municipalities that have that are richer have better services than poorer communities because they're not going to get funding from different communities. So and so some of the richer communities have better services, and the lineups or the wait lists for services and life stabilization is longer in larger communities than in mid-sized communities or smaller, richer communities. And it makes a difference as to how much of a priority these communities put on providing these services as well. And the idea of life stabilization is not a quick process. Any of these processes are more than a matter of, you know, waving a magic wand and saying that you are healed. So they take time and work, and the person has to be ready to do the work in order to stabilize their lives. Even homelessness is sometimes a question of getting them into a home, but there's a lot of factors that contribute to homelessness. So this is why the rates have to be raised, even if you have life stabilization, because poverty is a contributing factor to many of the life stabilization things as well. So they can do the work without having to worry about poverty. And the other part of this is that I'd like to just reiterate and add to Trevor's presentation that until the clawbacks are decreased, you know, on both ODSP and OW, we get a 50% clawback after $200, and that's like just really not fair. There's no incentive to work, having to work when the government is taking like 50% of your income after $200. And there's no incentive to work when the jobs that are exploitative, unsafe, or precarious. Precarity makes it worse because if you have a job on OW or ODSP, because if you make a lot one month and then it gets taken away from your check, then the next month you'll have less money. So so we need steady, like sort of steady-ish incomes in order for this to be an incentive to work. In all of these plans, I don't see any contribution from businesses to hire people with disabilities. Where is business in all this? They say that there's that we should get a job, but how can we get a job if businesses do not don't agree to hire people with disabilities? That's the part of the equation that's missing. So unless those factors are improved, then you won't see a good change in the systems. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrea, and thank you to all of our speakers. Great insights there, but also lots of work to do. We've heard a lot today about how the province can play an active role in addressing some of the challenges we see around income security and for people living on low incomes. And we need to think more both about those policies and also how we make them happen. We have regulations that have been rumored to be coming for months now and should arrive at any time. We have rates still at rock bottom levels. So there's a great deal of public policy to shape and a lot of good opportunities to shape it in the immediate future.